let's get to the big story at this hour. So yesterday on the show, we reported how Ahmedabad has decided to impose night curfew from 9 p.m. in the night to 6 a.m. in the morning for a few days, while that decision has been extended to other districts in the state, including Surat and Vadodara. Meanwhile, the state of Madhya Pradesh has also decided to impose night curfews from 10 p.m. onwards in 5 districts of the state. Now, a number of decisions have been taking place in the last 24 hours or so. So Maharashtra, for one, has decided to keep all schools and colleges shut till December 31st. Remember, they were going to allow students in class 9th onwards to go to school and college from the 23rd of this month, but that has now been extended further. Likewise, in the state of Haryana as well, they have decided to now extend the date for schools to reopen, and all schools will be shut till November 30th. In Delhi, door-to-door surveys will be taking place in containment zones amidst the COVID-19 spike. So this is what we know right now. Along with this, just one more data point. For the first time in 47 days, the number of active cases in India are more than the recoveries. Now, the important thing is that is just one day's data. We'll have to wait and see how all of that pans out as more data comes in. But it is beginning to look like a slightly concerning situation just when India thought it was over the hump. In fact, global lockdown worries have been weighing in across the world and on US markets as well, which are slightly in the red in morning trade. Let me go across now to my panel to understand what the next steps could be, and that's really key because we don't want to jump the gun and assume the worst, but neither should we be in a situation where we are just hoping that everything will be fine and we will not see a resurgence in cases. Clearly, there are warning signals here. So let me go straight across to our panelists. I have with me this evening Dr. Shashank Joshi, who's Dean of the Indian College of Physicians and is also on the COVID task force of the Maharashtra government. Dhrubabrata Ghosh Dastidar joins us on the show. He's with Protiviti India and has been very closely tracking the COVID numbers and making projections of them over the last several months. Swaminathan Aiyar, consulting editor ET Now, joins us for his perspective. And I'm also speaking this evening with Peter Cardillo of Spartan Capital Securities, just to get a sense of how the world is responding to new forms of lockdown. I don't want to call it lockdown because there are various permutations and combinations. Clearly, we're not going to go back to what was happening in April and May. One hopes, fingers crossed. Having said that, let's begin. Dr. Joshi, how do you see the situation panning out with what we've heard in Gujarat and in Madhya Pradesh? What strikes the layperson is how quickly things seem to have turned, with night curfews now being imposed all of a sudden in 9 districts just in the last 24 hours.
So, Tamanna, thank you for having me. And I think we should not panic. I think this is something anticipated as the temperature dropped across the India. And we know that India is a very heterogeneous geography. In North India, we're already seeing temperatures dropping, pollution going up, festive season around the corner, no COVID appropriate behavior, a lot of reckless behavior, no masking. We are anticipating a small spike. And that we have seen in North India. We will see it in another 4 or 5 states. We need not be complacent, but I don't think there is something to be alarmistic about it. And whatever we'll have to do is we'll have to rework our strategy again, do micro containment. I don't think lockdown is a solution, and we will have to put some more stringent measures in place. But the prime concern is that citizens at large need to follow COVID appropriate behavior, which is not happening anywhere, in India. And that's something very sad. And that's something which people need to cooperate. Because if we don't do that, we are just going to lose this battle and get some second waves. We know that we are repeating history after 100 years. In Spanish flu, almost in the second wave, 1 crore Indians died. More than 10 million Indians died when Indian population was only 21 crores. So if you just see that history 100 years back, and we know that our winters can hit us hard, particularly in those geographies where temperatures go below 10 degrees, we will have some challenge on hand in a month coming from now. So there are some concerns, but I don't think we need to be alarmed. If we take appropriate measures even now, I think we can do a lot of corrective action. So I'm cautiously optimistic.
Okay, now just one follow-up, Dr. Joshi. So these night curfews which have come in place, because I know you've been involved in the process which takes a call on such things. Are these just precautionary measures, you think, that these local governments are making sure things don't get worse, which is why they've come in with something like night curfews beforehand? Or are these kind of measures taken when things are already beginning to get pretty bad, when numbers are increasing in a not so comfortable zone?
Well, I think these are a mix of both. I think some places it's a preemptive step. In some places where things have slipped out, like for example, Ahmedabad we know is fully full. All the hospitals are chalked like Delhi. So probably it's a little too late there, but better late than never. And we need to contain it at any cost. And I think we might need a little more stringent measures in some of these areas. But I think overall these measures are welcome, and we might need to do some further measures, because as long as they don't hurt or harm the economy, we need to get them in order. My only worry and concern is that other parts of India are still complacent, and I think across board we need to have a little warning signal that as we unlock and more we unlock, we are not going to get herd immunity so fast. We are not going to get a vaccine so fast. So next 3 months are going to be make and break for us. And it's important that we recognize that governments have recognized it, state governments, and they are trying to do some preemptive steps. But I think we need citizens' cooperation more than government cooperation.
Dhrubu, what are the numbers looking like? Because I know you track the numbers very closely, and overall we've been having good news in terms of new daily cases in India, below 50,000 fresh cases every day consistently for quite some time now. But if you go deeper in to the more granular data, are there any red flags popping up?
I think Dr. Joshi just mentioned about it. Most of the northern Indian states, right, had started showing warning signals quite some time back. So if you take Gujarat, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Haryana, and Delhi, all of them had started showing a slowdown and an increase in the number of cases. So if you track those numbers, it perhaps was a couple of weeks ago that these numbers had started going up or kind of stabilized. So yes, there are red flags there. We have to be cautious. We perhaps as a country cannot afford a second lockdown like most of the European countries do, right? So we have to be a little bit more cautious in how we are trying to deal with this situation. So we have to follow the COVID appropriate behaviors. But if you look at some of the other states down south and east, you would not see those warning signals yet. And that's some kind of a good news for us. And that has been able to keep the numbers below that 50,000 mark. And I believe a couple of days back, it was even below the 30,000 mark. So we are optimistic in from that perspective. But yes, the northern states seem to be a cause of concern now. And the numbers seem to be increased in the coming fortnight or the next 3 weeks.
Okay, so that is the concerning bit. Swaminathan Aiyar, of course, is also with us. How do you see this situation developing, Swami? Because we are just about beginning to feel like things are coming back to quote-unquote normal back here in India. The flights were beginning to fly at a decent amount of capacity. Your commercial establishments, etc., were picking up. The festive season showed that demand was coming back. Does this come at a very, very bad time?
Well, this is happening everywhere in the world, in the Northern Hemisphere. There was a reduction, there was optimism, stock market surged, the number of indicators suddenly improved. But then inevitably winter is coming. December, January and February will be the 3 worst months. Everybody knows that. I mean, this has been stressed by Dr. Fauci in the USA. It has been stressed by various people in Europe. You can see that the rates of infections in those countries is suddenly skyrocketing. In some cases, it's the worst ever. India, luckily, doesn't get quite that cold, but definitely North India will get cold. Some parts of it get very cold. We have to expect that the virus is going to stage a comeback here, as it has done in the rest of the world. We should be prepared for it. I think we are prepared for it. People know that there is going to be a spike, and what we require is a calibrated reaction. Panic, of course, is silly. We don't want a full lockdown again. The cost of a lockdown in terms of income, human costs, the loss of schooling and human capital, all these are tremendous. So as far as possible, we should try and keep all these things open. A curfew is a relatively mild form of reduction. But I would certainly agree that, the most important thing is, are people going to observe social distancing? Will they wear masks? Will individuals be careful? If individuals are careful, if the individuals are responsible, I think, we will overcome this particular spike without too much damage. If, on the other hand, people are lax, then no amount of government action will prevent the virus from spreading. So really, we need to have a campaign of awareness, and that, the solution lies in our own hands. Let us do it by behaving sensibly.
The thing is that we were seeing a drop in cases without any great kind of care being taken by people. I understand what you're saying, Swami, completely, and what Dr. Joshi is saying as well, that people have to be concerned and have to take care, but they haven't so far. But the fact is that over the last few weeks, when the cases were dropping, it wasn't as if people were suddenly taking a lot of care and they've stopped now. My question is, what can you do to ensure that? Will the 2,000 rupee fine like Delhi is imposing, is that the way forward? And when we say pinpointed action, where will you go beyond night curfews? Because if things get worse, you will have to go beyond. How can you move forward in a calibrated fashion without really harming the economy? What are the options there?
No, the options are all the way down to a complete lockdown, but I would be against that. I would say we have already seen that in Indian conditions, where people are living in very crowded conditions, gullies are very full of people. There are 7-8 people sleeping to a room in many cases. In those circumstances, merely shutting down all economic activity is not going to solve the problem. So to some extent, we are going to have to live with the kind of infections that are inevitable when so many people are in close contact, simply because we are a poor, crowded country with poor, crowded cities. So we will live with that. So I would go easy on government action. I would stress awareness more than government action. If there are 7-8 people sleeping in a room and the entire locality is extremely crowded, you don't solve any problem by closing down the shops or by closing down the schools. So I would keep those going as far as possible. And I would focus on an awareness campaign above all. I think by now we are getting to the stage where most of us know somebody who has caught it. And I think on that basis, we have to say, till now you might have think, well, it's somebody else's problem. Increasingly, it is becoming the problem of people we know. My own brother, my own sister-in-law got it. And I'm sure with most people, the moment you hear that people you know have got the disease, that is the time for an awareness campaign to really strike home. And that is where I would put the emphasis rather than just draconian lockdowns.
Yeah. Peter, thank you for your patience. And for getting all of the perspective of what's happening in India. But I was very keen to talk to you on the show, and not just from the point of view of what's happening in US markets and global markets, but also at how the world is looking at the sporadic lockdowns, how people are dealing with it, how countries are dealing with it at a time when positive news is beginning to flow in on the vaccine front. What is the outlook? Is it that this is going to be a temporary bout of mini curfews, lockdowns and restrictions which will end once a vaccine is in the picture?
Well, there's no question that, there'll probably be lockdowns. In fact, here in the States, as you know, there are some lockdowns in various states. And here in New York, just the other day, the schools were closed. We don't have a curfew imposed just as yet, but in California, they did impose a curfew. And so many states are taking precautionary measures because, the cases, the infected cases have been spiking up here in the States. They're well over 150,000 per day. And so obviously, everyone is waiting and hoping for the distribution of the vaccines. And of course, as you know, just today, Pfizer and its partner are presenting to the FDA emergency clearance. And so that probably means that within the next several weeks, a vaccine will be shipped. The question is, not only is the distribution in question, but the question is who gets it first, and of course, how long will it take, and the production of the vaccine. So I think, unless the vaccine suddenly begins to dissipate, I think it's going to mean that restrictions and lockdowns will be here for a while. And so that's going to, in some way, going to impact the economic recovery.
Dhruva, give us a sense of what your projections are showing now. When do you think the peak is hitting, especially in major cities, in light of festive season, cold weather, etc.?
Next week, we begin basically the holiday season here in the United States. Next Thursday is Thanksgiving, and in normal times, it's the biggest driving day of the year. Of course, we heard from many, where we heard from Dr. Fauci and many others who are on the team cast, and they have basically all said, do not travel. And so from that perspective, obviously, the airlines and other means of transportation are going to suffer. But the question is, will people, abide by the suggestions? And my guess is that some will and some will not. And so we could see a real spike in the virus post the Thanksgiving festivities.
Exactly like was here post the Diwali festivities, where the main festive season. That question was for Dhruva, though. Dhruva, let me come to you. Where do you see the peak? What are your projections showing for numbers in India?
See, India again is a mixture of many states, right? So the number of India, I think, has already peaked off, and I don't think it will peak again or cross the number which it was primarily in the month of September. But yes, there are certain other peaks which is happening across different states. Delhi is seeing its third peak. I believe Rajasthan and others also are going to see its second peak. And it will happen in the next 2 to 3 weeks from now. Now, this is conditional to the kind of actions each of the state governments are taking. The numbers, we are still working on it. We will take some time to come back on that. But it looks 2 to 3 weeks down the line from where we stand now.
For Mumbai and Delhi?
For Delhi, Bombay is still on a stable condition right now as we speak. Delhi is picking up as we speak. In the recent time, if you see, the Delhi numbers have been shooting up. Bombay, for that matter, Kerala and other states, they are all on a stable footing or going down.
In fact, speaking about Mumbai, where there's a lot of interest because it was the hotspot for quite some time, we caught up with BMC Commissioner Iqbal Chahal today, and this is what he had to say about the condition in Mumbai. He was very optimistic that things are stable here. Just listen in.
So we are in the best possible position. Even if we had 490 cases and you say they doubled up, but the positivity has fell down from 9% on 14th November to 5.9% today, punishing people not wearing masks. We started with a target of 10,000 fines every day. Today morning, we have done yesterday in one day, we fined 14,000 people not wearing masks. The cumulative figure has gone to 400,000. And now we are hiking up to 25,000 mask fines per day, which means 25,000 people in Mumbai would be fined every day not wearing masks. And I salute the honorable citizens of Mumbai that listened to our appeal, and despite partial ban on Diwali day, there were hardly any crackers in the city of Mumbai. And although we had said that in public premises there will be ban, in private premises people can bust crackers, but I was told and I saw from all over Mumbai that is a pin drop silence in the city of Mumbai on the evening of 14th.
Dr. Joshi, tell me about people's behavior. We know the symptoms of COVID fatigue. It's setting in, it's natural. And you said people have been behaving recklessly. I just reiterate what I asked a little while ago, that even when cases were coming down, people were behaving the same way. There has been no significant change in people's behavior. So what really is the impetus for people to become more careful now? How will that be implemented by policymakers?
I think people's behavior is self-regulatory. And I don't think we can influence it except for an awareness campaign, making them responsible for their own families, for their own citizens. But two things are very important, what you said. Number one is India is a tropical country, not a temperate country. So obviously during monsoon, we had the peak, which picked up somewhere in September. And of course, Mumbai had two peaks. First was in May end, June first week, and second was in September. The third peak in Mumbai, we expect between around 25th of December to around 25th of Jan. And India will probably have a challenge in mid-Jan to mid-February. But I'm not so sure whether these numbers will be, spiraling up if people contain themselves. COVID fatigue did set in. People were frustrated because they were not able to get out and move around. And that is why they were becoming reckless. I think now to a great extent, unlocking has happened. And I think they have also realized, as Dr. Aiyar rightly said, when you have somebody in your own family getting COVID, I think you definitely become more cautious, more careful, and try to have some self-regulatory pattern. I think it is everywhere. It could be you and me, any day, any time. And when that thing dawns upon you, I think people tend to be a little more careful. Even after getting COVID, it doesn't make you immune from COVID. You can still get it again and again. Remember, people who got COVID in March and April, if they don't have adequate antibodies or immunity on board, they're equally vulnerable to get another infection now. That it is not impossible to do that. It's rare. It's extremely rare. But remember that we need to consistently keep positivity on, but we need appropriate behavior. Behavioral change needs a mass movement. It needs something where every person needs to cooperate. And I think we need to be proactive. I think some amount of cooperation we have seen in Diwali, as our commissioner said, but our numbers, our TPR today is 6%, and it was somewhere around 18% just a month back. And I'm certain that Delhi, which was 5%, went up to 13%. But, as winter is less in Mumbai, Mumbai is unlikely to have that big challenge which other parts of India has seen. But if a lot of cross transportation occurs, which means a lot of people from North India come to Mumbai, a lot of people from Mumbai go outside, and then of course inappropriate behavior is following that, we are headed for a disaster, and we want to mitigate that. And that's what policymakers will try to do. They will try to limit the cross migration across various states. That micro containment might happen to some extent as a mitigation measure. And you will also see that a little unlocking, that calibrated approach which Dr. Aiyar is saying, very slowly, opening might be deferred or delayed or protracted. And I think people will cooperate. I think Mumbaikars, I must congratulate them. They are cooperating. We are still seeing lesser numbers. Our trend is getting better. Mumbai doesn't get very cold. It doesn't get very polluted as the way Delhi does, but it does get polluted to a great extent in some ways, in some geographies. But I think overall we should do okay.
But let's not pat ourselves on the back as of yet. Yeah, but we can't be complacent, as Dr. Joshi said. That would really and truly be a mistake. And let's just mask up. Let's just be careful and not wreck the rest of this year and not really go back on all the progress we've made. Nobody wants that situation once again. On that note, I want to thank all of you for joining us on the lead story. The big takeaway here is simply that yes, there have been night curfews now in 9 districts in 2 states, but good to look at it as precautionary measures. It doesn't mean things will escalate, but definitely means we need to step on the pedal in terms of being careful.